Good evening, everyone. My name is Sue, and I am a program associate here at the library. Just a few things to run through before our program starts. We're using a hybrid format this evening, so we have viewers both here in person as well as online. If you are watching from Zoom, we're using a webinar format, and so you can see and hear us, but we cannot see or hear you. We're going to do questions and answers at the end of the presentation today. So here in person, please hold your questions to the end. However, if you are on Zoom, you can add them at any time to the Q&A or the chat. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to see a live transcript, you're going to look for the toolbar and show captions. If you don't see that, look for more and then captions. The library is using our assisted listening system. It's pretty easy to use. It's a headphone, and I'd be happy to lend one to you. Just come see me in the back of the room. Please take a moment now to silence your cell phones and watches and any other devices. And I have a few programs to tell you about that are coming up. This is a newer program that we have. It is only in person, and you do need to register. It's called the Silent Book Club. So you can come to the gathering room, which is upstairs. It's from 7 to 8:30 on Thursday, October 2nd, and come read with friends at the Silent Book Club in quiet camaraderie. All readers and types of reading are welcome. Ebooks, audiobooks with your own earbuds or earphones, poetry, prose, fiction, anything you like. You can bring your own blanket and pillow. And we do have some extra books on hand. Enjoy some cozy seating and hot beverages and chocolates. And a program that's coming up on Saturday the 4th from 1 to 3 p.m. This is in person. You do not need to register. If you've ever noticed the art installation that is under the stairs across from the elevator, that is from local artist Donna Castellanos, and she will be here in the lobby with all of her collage materials, and you are invited to come and create your own Renaissance-inspired costume figure art piece. And then on October 7th from 7 to 8 p.m., this is a hybrid program, Edgar Allan Poe to Tell a Tale. And Terrence Lynch will be here in his biographical sketch of Edgar Allan Poe. And so if you're interested in any of these programs, I'd be happy to register you at the end. And on Zoom, I'm going to go ahead and put the links into the chat. And I'm now going to turn it over to Jim. He's going to tell you a little bit more about himself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Kleinwachter. I work for the Conservation Foundation. I started doing, well, I wanted to take science in college, and everyone told me there's no jobs. So I went into business and went off on my business degree and wound my way back after the business end was over. I started doing volunteering. I went in my community. I live in Warrenville, and I went back to the area I used to fish along the river, and it was just a mess. Where bicycles and broken car parts and all kinds of junk everywhere. So I called the mayor and said, "Don't you clean our town?" And she said, "No, we don't clean over there. Why don't you do it?" And so I started cleaning it up, took my kids out there, and the Conservation Foundation called me and said, "We saw the amazing work you're doing." I called the public works director in the city and I said, "You don't clean up anything in the city." He goes, "Well, we pick up the stuff along the road." I said, "Good to know." And so I called him up on Monday and I said, "I went by River Road in the corner here, and there's a big pile of junk by the side of the road. There's another one down by the school." And he goes, "You have no clue how this got there." And I said, "Well, So he laughed and he said, "Are you doing this every year, just so I know?" And I said, "Yes, if I have to." The Conservation Foundation called me and they said, "Well, Warrenville's now all clean." And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, what about West Chicago and Naperville? Don't you want to clean them all?" And I said, "No, I do not want to clean them all." And so she said, "Well, why don't you come to the meeting and you can tell people about it?" And I said, "I don't like meetings. It's boring." And she goes, I'll bake you cookies. So I went to the meeting, got the cookies, and started going to these meetings, and eventually got a job working for the Conservation Foundation, a great organization. And you may have heard of some of the big organizations like Nature Conservancy. There are nationwide groups like that, but they're doing things in like Oklahoma or Colorado, saving land and doing different things. They can't come to Elmhurst. And so there are local land trusts like ours that focus on counties generally. So we're working in Kane, DuPage, Will, Grundy, LaSalle, DeKalb. So a 7-county area. And we work with other groups. There's one in Cookeretti, Lake McHenry. I'll show you pictures. We get some funding from DuPage County. If you have water issues in your yard and you wanted somebody to talk to somebody about water problems, they're paying me to be the guy because they don't want to send anybody out. So when I'm out working, I'm always saying what the community is looking for, the same thing as the county is looking for, the municipality is looking for, and all the communities. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Elmhurst or Downers Grove, Lyle, you name it, Naperville, they all have the same problems with everybody flushing their water into the storm sewer. And when we have too much water, then there's flooding and those types of problems. So we're trying to solve those problems individually on the yard by yard basis instead of having this cumulative problem. Our farm is on a protected farm, which we protected for Lenore McDonald. So it's called the McDonald Farm. And there's 60 acres permanently protected with a conservation easement. And we've taken that old farm and brought it up to date with this, what they call green infrastructure. So we've added wind turbines and solar panels and rain barrels and butterfly gardens and a green roof, you name it, we've added it. And you can see where the road would have come right through the farm had it not been for the permanent protection of these conservation easements that are placed on private property. And this can never be developed. So those homeowners on the outside oftentimes call us and they'll say, well, I'm looking at this house adjacent to this beautiful farm, but when's the farm going to go? And we're saying the farm is permanent. And it's a nice thing to be able to have that chunk permanently protected. So on the 60-acre farm, we have 50 in organic vegetables, and we're able to use rainwater to irrigate the farm. A lot of cool things going on there, and it's right in Naperville. We have a program we're called Nature RX. We're trying to tell people to get outside. We come from cavemen. We come from Little House on the Prairie, and now we're living in, high-rise apartment buildings, and we're not outside enough. And even though we're blessed with great forest preserves and parks around us, you don't get there on a daily basis. And so having a little bit of nature closer to you is a really good thing for all of us, for our health. Picture on the right is my daughter dancing in the Mediterranean at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a whole story about what we were doing out dancing in the middle of the night, but you can see her joy. And my granddaughter, I took her fishing. So I'm trying to incorporate these things in my kids' lives so that they can pass it on. And even my daughter-in-law, she says, she called me and she said, that's Brooklyn. Brooklyn likes bugs. What are we going to do about it? And I said, oh, I had this before. You tell her, don't bring it in the house, honey, it'll die. She will not bring it in the house. And we don't have any scorpions or bad things around here. So mom doesn't want anything to do with it. She can look at it through the glass door and have her release it again. But the fear people have of snakes or bees or whatever else are primarily unfounded worries that people have. And we try to bring that to people, like, let's really look at these things because they're not as scary as you think. One of the couples that I went to their home, they said, well, can you help us? And I said, that's what I'm here for. And they said, well, we oftentimes sit out in the evening and we have a glass of wine and we just enjoy the outdoors. That's great. Yeah, but there's this thing. Yeah, come on, tell me about it. It's this gray thing. It crawls out from under the deck and it's got this rat tail and it's got teeth that stick out and it just moves really slowly and it's like a prehistoric creature. And I said, that's a possum. Yeah, well, what? How do you get rid of it? How do you should we kill it or what? And I said, no, they're they are prehistoric. They were here when dinosaurs were here, a different size, but to try to instill some sense of awe. And they don't hurt anything. They won't kill your dog. They're marsupials where they have a pouch and little babies hang on their back. It's an amazing creature. And we may not think it's pretty, but kind of understanding the big picture of things, it's all part of the ecosystem. And we're the only thing that doesn't fit well in the ecosystem. So we're doing it here. There's a map of where we've been working. Those colored dots are some of the projects we've worked on. We're buying land for forest reserves and park districts. We're cleaning up the rivers and streams. We're protecting permanent property with those easements. We're helping landowners implement conservation practices in their yards, all kinds of good stuff that's going on. And my background is in marketing and sales. So when I came to the Conservation Foundation, they're still not well known. I doubt any of you have heard of us or been to our farm or our headquarters now. And they laugh and they say, well, we're the best kept secret in DuPage County. And we're like, well, when you're a not-for-profit based on donations, you don't want to be a secret. So I'm out trying to change all that. So what we're trying to do is have people think a little more eco-friendly. And I put some bullet points up because I don't think there's anything scary there. And I tell people, like, raise your hand if there's something there that doesn't sound right to you or is crazy. And we'll take questions at the end. But it's not that difficult and it's not that scary to take a step. And I think most of us, I started the Conservation at Home program because there's a big gap. There's some beautiful books, and libraries is a perfect place to talk about the books. There's a giant book about called Native Plants of the Chicago Region. It's by Swink and Wilhelm. And I guarantee 30 seconds with that book open and you close the book and say, I can't do this. It's very technical, there's no pictures. It's line drawings and Latin words and not good. And then there's some books by, like, Doug Tallamy has some beautiful books, beautiful pictures, wonderful stories about native plants and the benefits and so on. But there's a gap between, gee, that sounds good, how would I implement that? And so that's what we do, is we try to fill that gap with implementation techniques that I'll show you tonight. So where it starts, I taught at College DuPage for 12 years, and the difference between understanding that plants are not just decorations. They are the life force of this planet. We have no life here without plants. And kind of the gravity of that situation is, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the atmospheric conditions were created from plant growth. So understanding that plants are life. And then the next step, once we take that into an account, it makes a difference what kind of plants we plant. If you're going to plant, if you want that hummingbird to come, they don't come for conversation or a cup of coffee. They're coming for food. And we either have things in our yard that are support these creatures, or we don't. And that couple that had the possum under their deck, it's a good example of, they have things that the possum could live and use in their proximity of their home. So the possum took home there. And I think for them, they'd say, well, tell me what those things are and I'll get rid of them. But understanding if we want these things, we have to change some of the landscape stuff that we've been doing. So we have a process. We'll do everything, literally come to your yard for free. So there's a checklist of things that you can do. I'll talk about some of them tonight. And you can earn a sign for your yard like this one. This has happened to be at Lyman Woods, which is 31st Street and Highland Avenue. But we bring them to landscapes, and there's over now 5,000 homes. We have 10 different groups running my program throughout the region. We're in 3 states. We're in Michigan, Illinois. I'm working on Indiana. There's one up in Wisconsin and all the way down to St. Louis. So just bringing some conservation practices into residential landscapes. This is a map of where they're located. The dark red ones in the lower section are mine. And then the franchise groups have different colors throughout the region. So what we're trying to do is more than just in your town or your in DuPage County, even it's far reach across the region. And here's a picture of someone that implemented it. So on the left is the picture of when they started and at the end when they finished. So I'll show you some more pictures of before and after we've implemented some of these practices. When I talk about native plants, what we're generally describing is something that was here when the settlers first came. So when there was the invasion of people coming across the United States, what did they find when they came here? And how has it changed since then? And those changes have been negative for wildlife. So why are we talking about this? Well, you've heard of buy local. You want to buy eggs from chickens that are around us and buy pencils that were made locally and so on. Why aren't we thinking of the plants that are grown locally, that we're here and we don't have to buy things from China? And understanding a little bit that there's benefits in the plants that grew here, and they're long lasting, they're sustainable, and they give value back to the ecology. So when you bring plants here, you can categorize any 2 plants, any group of plants, any individual plant into, is it decorative or is it functional? Is it working with the environment or is it separated from the environment? And that's what I was teaching at College DuPage, that they were teaching the students that all plants are the same. Doesn't matter what you put in your yard, just make it pretty and colorful. And I was like, wait a minute. So I went to change some of that out and break it out a little bit. If you were building a house, what we most focus on inside the house would be your needs. So you have to make sure that the kitchen is there, the functional things, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the stove and refrigerator, the heater, the air conditioner, all those things that are needed for the house to function properly. And then you can put the rug down and hang the picture and argue about what color you paint the walls. Those are the decorative things that come later. You function and then you decorate. And this is what we have not done with our yard. So understanding that there's a lot of benefits, and the main reason that you're looking at this is the difference. If you saw 2 plants on the table here, and one of them was, say, a hosta and another one was a coneflower, they'd look the same in the pot. They don't look any different to me. Well, the difference is in the root systems and the connectivity to the environment. So they are different, they function different, and we have to understand a little bit about it to know or understand the benefits. And even within any grouping of plants, there are better and not so good within that grouping. So there are some that goldenrod is blooming right now. It's very productive in the fall. Asters the same way. And milkweed is one we're trying to get everybody to plant for the monarchs. There's a huge problem with that. So kind of understanding a little bit more about them and the value they bring and what they bring to us. I've got, I started with my granddaughter. Now I have 3 of them. And I gave them a container with a bunch of milkweed leaves, and it had 2 little caterpillars in there. And I got a call saying that there's 3 now. And I said, okay, I missed an egg in the bottom of one. So she named them Banana, Super, and Cocoa. And then we got the corresponding questions, like, it crawled up in the top and it's not moving. I think it's dead, Grandpa. It's not dead. Looks dead. I know. Just wait. And then my daughter-in-law called me and she says, oh, wait a minute. The little caterpillar that they were playing with was green, black, white, and yellow. And you can mix green, black, white, and yellow any way you want. It's never going to be orange. I've done the color wheel. And I said, I know. This is the beautiful thing about nature. It's going to be magic. And what goes into that little caterpillar, the chrysalis, and what comes out. So I got a call and it's doing like, Cocoa, my mom told me Cocoa emerged today. And I said, it did? That's great. It's not Cocoa. Cocoa had all these legs and, I said, that's Cocoa. That doesn't look a thing like Cocoa. I said, I know, this is the magic, so eventually it came all the way around to the daughter-in-law says, we need to plant more milkweed. We had barely enough leaves that they could harvest to feed these little things that were eating. My grandson, he turned the TV off and was watching them in the little plastic container I had. And so she's like, it's like a TV screen. He's watching them eat the leaves, and she couldn't believe how much they were eating. So you can bring out some magic with some of these things that are in your yard. This is in Hinsdale, and there was this scummy part of the lake and eroded shorelines. They have got tons of geese, all these problems with the landscapes, and we changed it. Umpteen meetings because people didn't like the weediness of the lake, but the lake is better. These native plants are pulling nitrogen out of the water. There's no more erosion happening and causing phosphorus from the soil washing down into the lake. The geese are not there. Geese hate native landscaping. They're afraid of it. All their predators would hide in there. And so they just don't go in there. And we've got a win-win situation. The landscaping cost went down, and some would argue that it's prettier. I think it is than the prior. So in the fall, we're not going to be planting now. So what would we do now to get ready for the spring? And understanding some of the things that are going on, and like this is butterfly milkweed, so it doesn't look like traditional milkweed. So I'm showing people how decorative and pretty. I'll show you some other pictures of how this plant looks in decorative landscapes. So not all of these plants are ugly and weedy looking things. They can be very pretty. And getting over the fear of bees, for example. My daughter was home and she moved her chair over by the flower bed that I had, and she didn't realize that she had put her chair right up against this plant that was very attractive to bees. And so as she was reading her book, she realized there was like this hum, and it was the bees all over this plant that she was inches from. And so she pulled my chair away, thinking, oh, I don't want to be that close to the bees. But then she started like looking and watching them coming in and all the stuff they were doing. They had no interest in her whatsoever. So even I just laughed at her. Kind of, she's been trained in being good to nature, but that same fear we've been given about certain things kind of creeps in. I don't have anybody that comes and asks me like, can you bring more snakes in my yard? Or those skunks are just so nice. I want more to come in my yard. So there's certain things that people stay away from. And if we can at least understand them a little bit better, then I think there's not as much fear. See the little caterpillars, the woolly bears crawling around now. um, they become a moth, an Isabella tiger moth. And they're moving from their feeding areas now. They're moving to their wintering spots. They're going to find a place to hide for the winter that's coming. So they're all prepared. And that's why you see them in the fall rather than in the other types of the season. They're not very showy, but in the fall, they're out moving around and you get to see them. Leaves are an important part of the ecology of our area. So we like our trees. The trees drop the leaves as food for themselves. They fall right down and they supposed to enhance the tree, but we have to rake them off of our precious grass. And they're an important place for those critters to hide. They're important for our soil health. We've got terrible soil across the region. We have heavy clay, we have rock. It's devoid of organic material. And that's what's falling from the trees. And we bag it, we shred it, we haul it away. And it's the exact same thing as what we need for our soil. So you can use the leaves for many different things. You can fence them if you want to kill some stuff off. I got some vinca that I'm going to keep killing. And I fence it up and put 2 feet of leaves on top of it. By the spring, the 2 feet will be 2 inches, and you turn that into the soil and vinca's gone, smothered. So there's a lot of different ways to use the leaves, but something as simple as dig a hole and bury them, turn them into the garden. Anything you can do to use them is a good thing. Composting is a great thing to do. We sell composters that you can buy them online or anywhere else to use them. But on these type of situations, having one with a cover that can lock on is an important part for using kitchen scraps. Nothing will get in your leaves, so you don't have to put leaves in that necessarily. You can use wire mesh, you can use some old pallets, anything you want to. The idea is stack it up higher. The higher it gets, the hotter it gets in the center. So rather than an inch across a flat area, if you stack them up, they'll decompose even faster. I have a bucket near my back door with a snap lid that I can put my everyday scraps in. Then when the bucket gets full, I take it out to the compost bin that I have out further in the yard. So a way of hiding this so that your husband doesn't yell about the compost bin. Working ways. Some of the people will freeze their compost and have a Tupperware thing in the freezer with the clippings, and then they take out the frozen clunk when they do it. Anything you can do to keep that organic material is a good thing. We've got loads of birds coming through here, and they're looking for food on the way south. So many of the birds, the prettiest, best birds we have are dependent on insects for protein. And really all the birds we have eat insects, and the insects are on the plants that we have in the yard. So they're not going to be on hosta or daylilies. They're going to be on these native plants. The birds know where to look for their food. And understanding some of that stuff, leaving some of those leaf litter places for the bugs to hide and overwinter, as well as place for the birds to rouse around and get their food. Nothing feeds from turf grass, so that has no value whatsoever. It's a good time to start collecting seeds and understanding what's going to happen in the fall. So the seeds that are left, even for the birds that stay, is an important source of food for them over the winter. Some of the prettiest birds that we have across the region are strictly bug-eating birds. So even the hummingbirds, when I ask people tell me about what hummingbirds eat, they drink, well, I put out sugar water for them. That's fine. That's like me drinking a Pepsi. It doesn't give sustainable food source. It's a quick sugar high. And even with the orioles or tanagers, they will come and eat grape jelly or something from a feeder, but that's again just almost straight sugar. So understanding that they really get their important food source from bugs. And even the little wren, beautiful way it sings, but they don't come to a bird feeder. So bringing that information to people, if you want them, they have to feed, and they cannot feed on anything in the grass. They feed off of ants. Hummingbirds eat almost strictly ants, and they get them out of tree branches and things like that off. They don't get on the ground very often, but the wren will get in the leaf litter and he finds his food in there. So kind of understanding what they're eating increases your chance of having those birds come to your yard. People put up a wren house all the time. It's great. But understanding they have to feed too. So if you want to look at what's going to feed things and what's not working with the ecosystem, all you have to do is Google what it is, and it will tell you where it came from. When it tells you where it came from, you can tell almost directly whether or not it's engaged in our ecosystem or not. So these would be decorative plants. You could go on with, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with lilacs, for example. I have them. They remind me of my mother. But understanding there's no bees on a lilac. And if we want to have those birds that are feasting on bugs or berries, we have to think about, are the plants we have in our yard decorative or are they functional? Or do I have a nice mix of things? So you can look at some of those things. There's a few exceptions of some non-native plants that still have pollinator value, which is fine. But traditionally, a quick way to do it is just Google it. Fall is a good time to plant for trees and shrubs and prune. So we talk to people about that, and we have information on our website about that. We can harvest seeds themselves. So there are ways of learning what seeds are easy to harvest and what ones are a little more difficult. What we would do with the seeds when you do collect them, they should be kept frozen or put them in the garage or someplace that's cold to stratify. I had a lady that collected acorns and brought them all in the house. And I told her, well, she goes, is it safe to put them out yet? I was like, they're dead. You can test an acorn by putting it in water. It should sink. And when they float, they're no good. So kind of understanding the way it happens in nature. And you can answer a lot of questions by thinking, how does it happen in nature? One of the biggest questions I get is people say, well, the plants are up. When should I cut them down? And I said, well, you don't ever have to cut them down. I mean, in the prairie, nobody cuts it down. It gets burnt, maybe, used to get burnt once in a while. But nobody's there clipping it off. And there used to be bison or something that would trample it or things like that, but you don't have to do it. So following the way it works in nature is almost always the answer. So that's why they freeze in the winter. And so what you're looking for now is when they really get dry is the time that you can harvest the seeds. On the milkweed, they're green, and this is the wrong time. If you pick them now, they'll never ripen. So what you want is wait till they turn brown, they'll start cracking open, and that's the time that you can harvest the seeds on most of the seed bearing things that we have across our area. Other ones that are easy to collect the seeds listed there, and there's many more. I talked about using leaves to smother the existing stuff, whether it be grass, creeping Charlie, vinca, or some ground covers that are difficult. Besides leaves, you can use cardboard. You can cover things with a tarp. There's a lot of different ways to smother it if you don't want to use the chemicals to spray on it. some of the chemicals that are effective. They now make a high strength vinegar. So if you went to Ace or Home Depot, they sell weed killing vinegar. So instead of the stuff that you typically use in your kitchen is 5% vinegar and 95% water. And this stuff is 30% vinegar. And so it's higher. It's not high enough to burn your hand, but it's high enough to kill a lot of weeds. That would be something to try if you're not going to do Roundup. There are some other things that there's sometimes with some invasive species, like especially the woody stuff like buckthorn, honeysuckle, poison ivy. Those are things that almost need to have chemical application on them. Otherwise, they come back angry when you just cut them down. So there are some other techniques, like you can, if you had one buckthorn tree, you could cut it off and cover it with a bucket or a black plastic or something like that, anything that would not allow sunlight to get to the stump, and then you can kill it through the roots or apply the chemical. But if you have, you know, a forest with 100 buckthorn in it, it wouldn't be effective to cover each and every one of those little stems, and they all will come back. So kind of teaching people how we'd make new garden beds, how to use leaves and other non-chemical ways to reduce the areas of grass that we have and create areas where we want to make a butterfly garden, for example. And then how would we use those plants in the spring? And you can start them ahead of time in the house if you wanted. All of that information we try to get out to people. You can divide the plants that you have, pull them out, and as they start to go dormant, it's a good time to, I've got an issue where some of my beds have gotten invaded with crabgrass and barnyard grass and some things. And so sometimes I have to dig up the whole clump and pull it apart and rescue the really good plant in the center. Trees are a great time to put in the fall, and we just give some basic information about how to do it. The worst thing you can do for a tree is put mulch up onto the bark, and you see it everywhere, and landscapers are piling it up against the tree. You know, pull it away and do things the right way. What's nice about having the Conservation Foundation help you is we don't charge for our advice. I'm not trying to sell you anything. So, you know, whether it's tree trimming or how to prune something or what plants to put in, I brought you some information I'll talk to you about in a little bit, but it's unbiased information just based on the ecological benefit that you could do. Some of the plants you put in the good time to put them in is in the fall when you can get the seeds. Spring beauties, for example, I've never seen them available as plants. They always come seeded, and you get the seeds. You can even cast them out into the snow and they will work their way down and come back up. Jack in the Pulpit, very easy to harvest seeds. If you have some, they're a bright red seed pod, and you can break the little seed pods up and plant them out. So shooting stars are easy to find the seeds also. And even wild leek is another one that people didn't even know what it is. So you know what leeks are, you use them in cooking. Well, the wild leek that is around our area is, it's the base plant that before they genetically modified them. And it's called ramps. If you ever are in a fine restaurant and they'll say ramp gravy or something like that, well, you can grow ramps here, and they're called wild leeks, and you can harvest the seeds now, and they grow in the shade in our forest preserves and other places where it hasn't been disturbed. But another thing that you can seed into your yard in the shady areas. It's a good time if you have a rain barrel to shut it off. You're not going to water your garden too much longer, and just make sure it's not full. You can turn it over upside down, disconnect it, you can disconnect your hoses, this is the good time to look at that whole situation. If you are interested in rain barrels, we do a lot of education about rain barrels. We sell rain barrels. We're the #1 distributor of rain barrels in the state of Illinois. I had some people kept asking me, where do I get a good rain barrel? And so I went to my boss and I said, well, we should sell rain barrels. And he goes, we're not selling rain barrels. And I kept telling him, like, I could sell rain barrels. And he goes, like, fine, you want to sell your little rain barrels? Go sell your little rain barrels. And so about a week later, a semi truck comes into the farm and starts backing up next to the barn. And he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm selling my rain barrels. And he said, how many are in the truck? It's a semi. And I said, there's 300 in there. You can't buy 300 rain barrels. And I said, well, I sold 200 and I marked them up a little bit so I can cover the 300. And we're selling 50 a week. So the extra 100, probably 2 weeks and we're out again. And he like looks at me, he's like, carry on. So we now have sold 16,000 rain barrels, maybe 1,000 a year now, something like that. And it's all about, we don't sell ours based on, a huge profit margin. It's about having people get the understanding that rainwater is better for the plants. Anybody that has been growing plants, if you can get natural water without the chlorine added to it in your drinking water, it's a better way to go. So we do come to your yard. I'm very happy to be telling people, you've heard the story. Well, such and such was the least I could do. Well, I'm trying to do the most I can do. So I will come to your yard and help you if you want to implement some of these things. Some things, people call and they'll say, I just bought a new house and there's turf everywhere. Well, I probably don't have to come see your turf. But other people have complicated situations, either slopes or creek running through, or whatever the situation is. We want to make sure that that there's somebody that could help you. And there's the information. We also have a scanner. If you want your yard, you want me to come out, you can scan this little thing and it will bring you to a checklist where you can put your address and so on that. What I brought in the way of brochures tonight, there's one on the concept of the water. There's a thing called a rain garden, and it's planting plants that like wet spots. So it explains in here that, if you can see this, there's in the bottom of the pit, there would be a wetter area. The lower it is, the wetter it's going to be. And there are plants that like that wet spot, and there are plants that like the edge. And then pictures of some of the most common ones that are easy to grow. And then on all of these things, it says, if you're still confused, call Jim. So information's on there about rain gardens. This one I borrowed from Chicagoland Gardening magazine. They had an insert in it. And when they print an insert, it's done. So I said, well, I want it. And so I was able to get it from them. What it does on butterflies, it tells you all the butterflies we have in the region and what they eat, what they lay their eggs on. So you can design your own butterfly garden based on your favorite plant or your favorite butterfly. And then there's some other nectar source things, native and non-native, that are on the back of this. And then I took that big Swink and Wilhelm book that you can't read, and I made a Native for Dummies, or Native 101. The biggest thing people kept asking me was height. That was what they were most interested in. So I color coded. Green is short. Yellow is medium. Gold is taller. Purple is even taller than that. And then little icons that say, I like water. I need shade. Butterflies like me. Squirrels like me. And then on the back it says, if you're still confused, call Jim again. So we can give you help. It's not like I'm giving you a brochure and say, good luck. We're here to help people do things. And right now I'll take questions.
I'm gonna walk around with the mic. Hold on, let me just,
Over here.
so who had their hand up?
When do you recommend amending your soil? Is there a season that's better? I've planted coneflowers, wildflowers, numerous in my backyard, and nothing will grow. Nothing comes up. The soil's just trashed.
Generally, you don't have to amend the soil. If it's really bad, then it really wouldn't matter when you amended it. You could, putting the leaves in there, compost. I wouldn't put fertilizer, straight fertilizer. You can use manure. Or you buy compost. So like mushroom compost. Nobody likes to hear about it, but mushroom compost is horse manure. That's been used to grow mushrooms in, and now it's not as hot. So mushroom compost or cow manure, composted cow manure kind of a thing you can add to certain things. But with native plants, they're used to it being rough conditions, and generally they do well. One exception would be seeding. Seeding is much more difficult.
Okay.
So you get, especially if you buy a container of seeds at, some big box and you spread it across the area, you're going to get hundreds of things that pop up and you don't know what's what. And so then you get a mishmash of, so I would say stay with getting the original plants. So like coneflower now comes in a rainbow of colors. And some of them, especially the white ones, don't want to come back. Orange doesn't come back very well. So the original color is purple coneflower. And if you get the original one, it's really stable. Black-eyed Susans, there's a bunch of things that are easy to grow. Milkweed, but I start with plants typically. I hope that was helpful.
Yes.
I have two questions.
Okay.
The first is in regards to planting these local things. I know you talked about seeds and going and finding them. I don't know, or asking your neighbors, but like if I want to put in some of these things into my yard, can I go to a certain garden center or what do I do? Oh, hey, I'll go to Michelle's house. Okay.
Sharing is a good thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the plants I have in my yard were things people gave me over the years I helped them in some other way and they gave me plants. Just be careful what you take because some people are giving you excess stuff that you shouldn't be sharing, like lily of the valley or those orange ditch lilies or some other things that that don't have value and they're just other people are getting rid of stuff. So be careful what you get.
What about daisies? My mother-in-law gave them to me 20 years ago and they're all over my yard now. I keep splitting them and moving them. But are daisies not great? Because I didn't see them on here anywhere.
They're okay.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not something that brings a bunch of pollinators. They're not from here. They're not considered native here. But they bring decorative color and they add white to some other places.
And I never have to do anything. I don't touch them ever.
Right.
Except when I
you might
split
have
them.
too many of even some of the native stuff. We don't call it invasive. We call it when they're aggressive, they spread. And it's funny because I was training one of our employees to do some of the things and go out and visit yards. And so we had 5 scheduled visits. And the first one we went to, she says like, I have redbud tree and the thing drops baby redbuds everywhere in my yard. And I said, well, pot them up and we'll find homes for them. I foster dogs and I will foster your plants. Okay. So we'll find home for these little redbud trees. We get to the next house and she says, I got black-eyed Susans coming out of my ears. They go everywhere. And I said, well, pot them up. And she goes, what I really want is some redbuds. And I'm like, I got you. And so this is how the day went. The next lady said, Menarda goes crazy in my yard. And so it started this whole thing saying, so we have a Facebook page where people can say, come to this address and you can pick up my stuff. It's not open to the public. It's open to conservation people. So did it answer your?
That's good. No, it did. Yeah, because I think I know enough people I ask around. But the second question then is regards to the rain barrel. I'm fine with, like using it to water all of our plants. We always had a vegetable garden, and we would use it, and then I got weirded out by it because it's coming off of our roof. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no 100% answer. And if you Google, read about it, you'll get all
Right.
these different answers. My feeling is that the newer roof systems, there's no asbestos anymore in the roof. There's no really carcinogenic things that we're putting on our roofs.
Okay.
So it doesn't kill the grass. It doesn't hurt. I haven't seen any issue with using it in a vegetable garden. I
Okay.
use it in my vegetable garden.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So does that vinegar product work on creeping Charlie? Does that vinegar product work on creeping Charlie?
I believe it does, but you have to
Ah.
be careful because it kills everything. So you can't just, it's not selective.
So
One of
if
the
it's
things
all over your lawn, and I mean, interspersed.
you can pull it out, which is tedious. Another
Now
thing you
you
can
have a
try,
acre. It's like, okay.
in the early morning when it's damp out,
Yeah.
you can spread powdered borax, the same borax used in laundry detergent,
Mhm.
to assist that. That creeping Charlie doesn't like that. So it's not going to like wipe it out, but it definitely creates a condition where it's not as happy there. So if you don't, the other thing would be you can chemically apply, it's 2,4-D is the chemical. So if you use that, it doesn't kill the grass, it just kills the weeds, and you could spot treat some area or something like that.
Yeah. What about moving milkweed? I have a lot of milkweed growing in a spot where I have flowers behind it, and I can't, milkweed's gone crazy. But I don't want it exactly. I want milkweed, but not
Yeah.
exactly there.
Those pods. So in the fall is a good time to harvest those pods that are splitting open.
Yeah,
And take the pods over to where you want them to be.
okay.
And then in the springtime, when they start coming up, just when they're late coming up, they won't come up. It's like late May before you start seeing the sprout. If you get them early, you have a chance of moving that plant.
Oh, so. Yeah.
Have you? That's
Yeah.
usually they don't move well.
You have to soak them overnight in a bucket of water and then plant them. And I think I did 12 and 11.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, we generally don't say move them later.
Can we text you questions then, or go to your email and ask
Yes.
questions?
Yes, you can.
There'll be a spot for your name.
That one goes to, there's two of us that get that, so I will get it
Okay.
and my
And then I
coworker.
had a quick question about, we have some extra sandbags, and the neighbor said, oh, just sprinkle it in your lawn. It will help, and it'll just integrate into your lawn and be helpful.
Yeah,
Sand?
sand, if you have heavy clay,
Yeah.
gypsum is another thing that you can buy
Oh,
and you can add it. It helps break up clay. So sand is just little rocks. I mean, there isn't anything that changes it, but clay is so dense that if you work sand into it, it just doesn't let the clay cling to itself so tightly.
And the city put in grass for us after doing some projects, and it never took. It just died, and now it's like hard soil. We can't get grass seed to grow. So should I
You
have
could
it-
try, like tilling it, loosen it up,
Mhm.
and then you could add some there where you're trying to grow grass, maybe a
Mhm.
place that you would amend it. Putting in compost, putting in leaf mulch, putting in organic material like compost or manure or something like that, and then seeding into that better
Yeah.
soil.
We might have you come out and look at it.
Okay,
Coming with the microphone.
it's coming with microphone.
Okay. In the fall, I rake up all of my leaves when they're finally down on the ground. And I take my lawnmower and go into it and just gnaw away until it's all shredded up. And I put that in bags and I take it to the back where my shed is. and I use it and complement the soil that I put plants in. So I always use a mix of that plus soil, and then I put any annuals that I buy, although most of my plants are perennials.
Good.
And, but the dried leaves mixed in with the soil, it's, it's almost instant composting.
Yeah, yeah. Shredding them up makes it compost faster.
Yep.
Um,
Been doing it for years and I don't have problems in the garden at all.
I have to save those shredded leaves. I have a garbage can with a snap lid, and I fill that thing full of the shredded leaves because the regular composter, like the black composter, it needs brown material to work. And so during the spring, I don't have enough brown stuff. So I use the leaves added to it, or pine needles are another thing you can add, or newspaper, shredded newspaper.
We have a couple questions from online. I have a showy goldenrod that flopped over in a heavy rain. It did not straighten up. Do you have suggestions for plant supports for taller natives?
Well, some of the things that the natives were designed by our creator to grow in a matrix. So some plants like goldenrod, they want to have companion plants around them. So some of the grasses like little blue stem, you can look at the height of the grasses that would give some support around them. Some things like asters, you can cut them down early in the spring and then they will grow shorter. So they're not up here where they're more likely to fall over. So the two suggestions I'd have are either clip them down early or put support plants around them.
I think my asters right now are around 5 feet tall. And regarding collecting seeds, I have already cut back cut back some natives such as nodding onion, butterfly weed, obedient plant, and pestamon. Can I lay out in the sun these cuttings with seed heads to dry out?
Yes, I would have preferred to have them dry prior than, dry on the plant before you harvest them so that they're already dry. So you may have, I know with milkweed, it does not dry properly if you pick the pods when they're green. You're gonna leave them on the plant. So it depends on the plant, the type of plant, but I would, in best case scenario would be to leave them on the plant until they're really dry looking and then harvest them. And then sometimes you want to, like Joe Pyeweed, for example, has a big seed head with a million seeds on it, and you don't want those plants anymore. So you harvest them off and you either give them away or destroy them or take them to a park somewhere or something. Milkweed might be too prolific too in your yard, depending on how they produce. And if there's too many, then you can pull those seeds off and either give them to somebody else or do something with them like that.
Hi, I have a two-part. One, bishop's weed. Somehow I have some. I didn't plant it. I can't seem to get rid of it. So I don't know if it's the same as the creeping Charlie.
It's worse.
Which that's what I'm feeling like because I have some of that coming from the other side of the fence. What do I do about it? And then my second question was about parkways because they get salt. What do you recommend planting and those things? So,
okay. There's a number of things that are aggressive. Bishop's weed's one of the worst. You can cover it. So cover it with cardboard. You can spray it, the vinegar or some type of 2,4-D, broadleaf killer. Sometimes it's embedded around a plant, and sometimes you have to dig that plant out and like just get the stuff away from it and then wipe out that area where it was. So be careful, especially when you're getting plants from somebody else. That's one of the things that oftentimes gets carried and you never had it before, and all of a sudden now it's going crazy. So that's what I would say on bishop's weed. What was the other?
the other one was about parkways.
Oh yeah.
If you want to do some planting on your parkway, but it gets the salt when the trucks come through with the
First,
snow.
check with your municipality. So some of them allow planting in the parkway and some of them have strict rules about how tall it can be and things like that. So make sure that you're following the regulations. And then there are a bunch of plants that are salt tolerant. So prairie dropseed is a nice sun-loving grass. So if it's shady or if it's sunny, we'd look at, different choices for the different areas. If it's, a lot of times they have trees along the parkway and it's all shaded, in which case then wild ginger and some of these things are pretty solid choices.
So I have more creeping Charlie in my yard, I think, than grass, which I don't really care about, except for now it's gone into my flower bed. Could I put the borax in the flower bed or would it kill the
And,
flowers?
Stay light.
Okay.
And then in the grass where you're pulling creeping Charlie out, we're suggesting white clover. You can buy clover seeds online, and the rabbits love the clover, bees love clover. So you're replacing it and taking some of that space up with something that we want.
Okay.
And so that would be something else. If you've got rabbit problems, planting clover is a nice thing. They love clover. And there's a beautiful native plant that's called purple prairie clover,
Okay.
but you cannot plant it because it's like rabbit candy. So plant the white clover, which grows prolifically and low in your grass,
Okay.
and give them, the fact that you have creeping Charlie means that you're not chemically spraying your whole yard.
Right.
I had a husband and wife. I knew I was in trouble when the husband and wife, one of them gets on one side and one gets on the other side of me. And so she was saying about the no mow May. So there's this, movement, or no mow till Mother's Day. And so the husband goes, I just want to mow my lawn. And so I looked at the lawn and I said, mow it. And she went, and I said, well, you're using some service and there's not a thing in the grass except grass.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Having long grass is not a benefit. So that's the only thing I find wrong with some of those programs is it says like, don't mow when you're doing a good thing. It's not the mowing that's causing the problem. It's the fact that there are no flowers in the spring.
Right.
So we want to encourage flowering, and a lot of people don't like dandelions. They have a function, but it's not very, I keep them out of my front yard, but I let some in the back. But having clover, having some things that are not as objectionable as creeping Charlie, or they don't take over as thickly. So I think if you manage creeping Charlie in the grass, you probably have less of it in the beds.
Okay. The other question I had is, so I have a bunch of spirea that I've just inherited with the house, but just anecdotally, there seem to be tons and tons of bees that love that. That's not native, right?
Not native, but there are some things. Sedum is another thing, like autumn joy sedum is another thing that not necessarily native, but it does have fall flowering. There's a few Russian sage, some annuals like zinnias that have some pollinator value. So I would say spirea would fall into that category.
Okay, thanks.
I think that what goes along with that is there's so many different types of bees and there's a small portion that are native. And so native plants will bring in the native bees, whereas, flies can be a pollinator too.
Yeah, and there's honeybees, which are not native, but they're welcome in our yards too.
Jim, there was another question. Is this butterfly pamphlet, is this offered online at all?
I believe it is.
Okay.
And if not, they can contact me and I'll make sure they can get one.
All right, let me just check here. One more.
Hi, I got a thorny weed that got into my raspberry garden, and it has the horizontal roots. So it literally took over the entire raspberry garden. So right now I'm having to totally dig out all of my raspberry plants because this is a weed that grows like 4 feet tall and just totally smothered
thistle?
everything. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm putting cardboard down as I'm ripping out the plants and everything. Can I replant raspberry in the spring or
Yes.
do I have to leave it on even longer?
No, I think it should be fine. And then you could look at spraying those little rosettes when they come up so that they don't ever go to seed. If they flower and go to seed, they're going to be a million more.
Yeah, I've pulled them out before they've gotten that
Okay.
far, but it's the roots underneath that are.
And so you might try spraying because the spraying will kill the roots.
I tried household vinegar with soap and
Salt. I
salt.
think, yeah.
And
Did that work?
no.
Okay. All right.
Very stubborn. So I'm just
Thistle
ripping
is a
out the whole
difficult
thing.
one. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to take difficult measures.
Okay.
But trying, I think the idea of trying the soap and the, those remedies like that is a good way to test it. And then if your plant is not working with that one, then try the other, or in worst case, you go to the chemical formation, but it's a tiny amount of it. I mean, we're not talking about spraying huge amounts, when I said you can use the chemical on buckthorn, for example, I mean, it's a tiny amount applied to the cut stump. It's not, large quantities of things.
Yeah,
So it would be a tiny little spray on that, just the green little shoot coming up.
I was cutting the bigger ones so that I'd have a stalk and pouring it down with a dropper, and it still didn't do it.
You know,
So, okay.
try the full strength vinegar, maybe next step.
Thank you.
Burdock is my weed enemy. That's another one that you
there's
really
enough.
have to dig that
At
one
least
up.
that one's easy to identify.
Yes.
And you can, garlic mustard's another one that you can get to that isn't so bad if you pull it out. So thanks for your time. Come up and get
Thank
the
you.
materials and contact me one way or the other if you have other questions.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Sure.